Imagine this. A woman sits alone in her apartment, scrolling endlessly through social media. With each swipe, each like, each comment, her brain receives a tiny burst of dopamine, a fleeting moment of connection in an otherwise lonely existence. Across town, a man stands at the edge of a bridge, clutching a bottle in his trembling hand. His addiction isn't just to the substance that's destroying his body. It's to the escape it provides from a reality he can't bear to face. Though these scenarios may seem worlds apart, they emerge in the same wellspring, a profound disconnection from self, from others, from meaning. Today, we're diving deep into the psychology of addiction, not as a moral failing or personal weakness, but as a deeply human response to pain and disconnection. Through the illuminating perspectives of Jung and Maté, we'll explore not just why addiction takes hold, but how healing becomes possible when we change our understanding of what addiction truly is. And by the end of our journey together, I'll share a revelation about addiction that might forever change how you view not only those struggling with dependencies, but perhaps even aspects of your own life that have remained hidden in shadow. Carl Jung, the renowned Swiss psychiatrist, observed something profound about addiction that continues to resonate decades later. He recognized that addiction often emerges not from weakness or moral corruption, but from a spiritual emptiness, a disconnection for what he called the self, our authentic core. In Jung's view, the addict isn't simply seeking pleasure. They're unconsciously searching for wholeness in all the wrong places. Think about this. When people turn to substances, behaviors, or even ideologies with compulsive attachment, they aren't simply seeking a high or temporary relief. They're seeking refuge from an inner landscape that feels unbearable. They're attempting to fill a void that seems to expand with each passing day. Maté, whose work on addiction has revolutionized our contemporary understanding, builds upon Jung's foundation with this powerful insight. The question isn't why the addiction, it's why the pain? Maté asserts that every addiction originates from a wound, often inflicted during our most vulnerable years. Consider the woman scrolling through social media. Perhaps beneath her seemingly innocuous habit lies a childhood where her emotional needs went unrecognized. Each notification momentarily soothes that original wound of invisibility. Or the man on the bridge. His relationship with alcohol might have begun as self-medication for unprocessed trauma, a way to quiet the voices of shame that have haunted him since youth. Addiction becomes not a choice, but a survival mechanism, a response to what feels unbearable within. It's the mind and body's misguided attempt to solve a problem of disconnection. But where does this disconnection begin? According to Maté, the seeds are often planted in childhood. A child who grows up feeling unsafe, unloved, or unseen develops what he calls a fragmented sense of self. This child learns to suppress authentic feelings and adopt behaviors designed to gain approval or avoid conflict. They lose touch with their genuine needs and emotions as a matter of survival. Over time, this suppression creates a chasm within, a gap between who they truly are and who they believe they must be to navigate the world safely. Addiction then becomes an unconscious strategy to bridge that gap, to numb the pain of this internal division. Let's pause for a moment and reflect on our modern landscape. Despite unprecedented technological advancement, despite material abundance unknown to previous generations, rates of addiction continue to rise. People are more connected digitally than ever before, yet paradoxically, they experience profound loneliness. They're surrounded by information, but starved for wisdom. They're driven to achieve, but disconnected from purpose. This collective disconnection creates fertile ground for addiction to take root. When we lose our sense of belonging, to ourselves, to others, to something greater, we become vulnerable to anything that promises relief, however temporary. Jung believed that healing addiction required what he called individuation, a reconnection with the authentic self. This perspective is echoed in Maté's work, which emphasizes that compassion, not condemnation, forms a foundation of recovery. When those struggling with addiction are met with understanding rather than judgment, they become more capable of confronting the roots of their suffering. This is where the psychology of addiction becomes truly transformative. It challenges us to look beyond behavior to the human being beneath, to see not a problem to be solved, but a person seeking wholeness. Imagine how different our approach to addiction might be if instead of asking what's wrong with you, we asked what happened to you. Our culture often perpetuates addiction by ignoring these root causes. We treat symptoms while neglecting sources. We stigmatize the very people who most need connection. We create environments of isolation and overwhelming stress, then wonder why people seek escape. The cycle continues because we've misunderstood what addiction truly represents. Both Jung and Maté offer us pathways to healing that remain profoundly relevant. They invite us to see addiction not as a character flaw, but as a signal. The psyche's desperate attempt to communicate that something essential is missing, that a reconnection needs to happen. The modern world offers endless ways to numb ourselves. We binge-watch shows until dawn breaks. We lose ourselves in work, earning praise for our dedication. Even as we burn out, we shop compulsively, eat mindlessly, check our phones hundreds of times daily. Each behavior offering temporary relief from uncomfortable emotions. Maté describes addiction as having three components: craving, temporary relief, and negative consequences. This cycle traps people because even as the consequences mount, the craving for relief remains overpowering. And this craving isn't simply for the substance or behavior itself. It's for the momentary reprieve from pain, the brief silencing of inner turmoil. Take a moment to reflect on your own life. Have you ever found yourself reaching for something? Perhaps food, alcohol, your phone, work, exercise, not because you wanted it, but because you needed to escape what you were feeling? These everyday examples illustrate how we all engage with behaviors that soothe us. The difference between habit and addiction lies in the degree to which these behaviors control our lives rather than serve them. Jung believed that the addict's craving for wholeness represented a spiritual problem at its core. In a society fixated on external validation and material success, the soul's needs often go unrecognized and unmet. One of Jung's most famous cases involved a man whose alcoholism had brought him to the brink of despair. Jung explained to this man that what he truly sought wasn't intoxication, but a spiritual awakening, that alcohol was his misguided attempt to experience transcendence. This insight gives birth to a powerful idea. Addiction can only be truly healed by addressing the deeper spiritual void it attempts to fill. The substance or behavior isn't the real issue. It's merely the solution the person has found to an underlying problem of disconnection. It's here that Jung's ideas intersect beautifully with Maté's focus on trauma. Maté explains that addiction is rooted in a disruption of our connection to our authentic selves. This disconnection often begins in childhood when we're forced to adapt to circumstances that don't meet our developmental needs. Consider a child raised in an environment where emotions are dismissed or punished. This child learns that certain feelings are dangerous or unacceptable. They suppress these emotions to maintain attachment to caregivers, a survival strategy in the moment. But over time, this suppression leads to a profound loss of authenticity, a separation from their true experience. As adults, we carry these adaptive patterns forward, often unconsciously. We continue to disconnect from painful emotions because we never learned how to integrate them. We seek ways to avoid feeling the discomfort of this disconnection, and addiction becomes one powerful method of avoidance. Maté describes this as a cycle. Trauma leads to disconnection, disconnection leads to pain, and pain leads to addiction. The solution, therefore, lies not in addressing the addiction itself, but in healing the underlying trauma and rebuilding connection. This raises a crucial question. How do we begin to heal? Both Jung and Maté emphasize the importance of reconnection to ourselves, to others, and to a sense of meaning beyond ourselves. For Jung, healing meant embarking on what he called the journey of individuation, the process of integrating the conscious and unconscious parts of self to achieve wholeness. This involves facing our shadows, the parts of ourselves we rejected or denied, and bringing them into awareness with compassion. For Maté, healing requires creating a space of safety where people can explore the roots of their pain without judgment. It means developing compassionate curiosity about our suffering rather than shame or avoidance. It means reconnecting with our bodies, our emotions, and our authentic needs after years or decades of disconnection. But healing isn't a straightforward path. It requires us to confront truths we spent years avoiding. It demands vulnerability, self-reflection, and the courage to ask difficult questions. What pain am I avoiding? What parts of myself have I lost touch with? What needs remain unmet beneath my behaviors? And perhaps most challenging, Am I willing to face the discomfort of healing to break free from the patterns that no longer serve me? Imagine a world where these questions weren't met with shame, but with understanding, where addiction wasn't seen as a moral failing, but as a human response to suffering. This is the vision both Jung and Maté invite us to embrace, a world prioritizing connection over condemnation, compassion over judgment. The journey toward wholeness isn't linear. There will be setbacks, moments of doubt, times when the pain feels overwhelming. As Jung reminds us, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. This means confronting our shadows, the part of ourselves we've hidden or rejected, and learning to integrate them with compassion. Maté echoes this, emphasizing that healing requires authenticity. We must reclaim the parts of ourselves abandoned in our attempt to fit in or survive. This process is uncomfortable but liberating, allowing us to move beyond cycles of addiction toward a life defined not by avoidance but by presence. To truly understand addiction, we must shift focus from symptoms to source. Society often treats addiction as the problem itself, but both Jung and Maté recognize it as a symptom of deeper disconnection. By addressing root causes rather than behaviors alone, we can begin breaking free from cycles that hold so many captive. Maté shares a story of a patient who struggled with severe addiction after enduring childhood trauma, including abandonment and abuse. For years, she sought refuge in substances that numbed her pain. But healing began not when she stopped using, but when she started confronting the memories she'd buried. Her journey illustrates a profound truth. Recovery isn't about willpower, but about reclaiming lost parts of ourselves. Think about this in your own life. Have you noticed how difficult it can be to sit with uncomfortable emotions? Perhaps you distract yourself with work, entertainment, or other activities to avoid confronting what lies beneath. This avoidance is a natural response to pain, but it creates its own form of suffering, a disconnection from authentic experience. Jung described this as fragmentation of the psyche. Parts of ourselves split off because they feel too painful or unacceptable. Healing involves reintegration, bringing these exiled aspects back into awareness with compassion. It's challenging work, but necessary for genuine wholeness. Maté complements this perspective with his emphasis on connection. People cannot heal in isolation. They need understanding, support, and community. Environments of shame only perpetuate addiction, while spaces of compassion foster recovery. When people feel truly seen and accepted, they become capable of confronting their pain and finding healthier ways to meet their needs. This raises an important question. How might we create such environments of healing? It starts with changing our perspective. Instead of viewing addiction as weakness, we can recognize it as a response to suffering. Ask yourself, what would happen if we approached addiction with curiosity instead of judgment? How might our world change if we replace stigma with support? Healing also requires reconnecting with our bodies and emotions. Addiction creates numbness, making it difficult to process feelings fully. Practices like mindfulness, meditation, and therapy help bridge this gap, teaching us to observe thoughts and feelings without judgment. These practices create a safe internal space to explore pain we've been avoiding. Jung reminds us that the journey inward is as important as the journey outward. He viewed addiction as a spiritual crisis at its core, a longing for meaning and connection. True recovery requires more than abstinence. It demands transformation. This idea echoes in spiritual awakening many experience in recovery, when reconnection with their authentic selves opens doors to deeper purpose. Maté expands on this by highlighting community's role in healing. Humans are wired for connection, and isolation only deepens suffering. Support groups, therapy, and meaningful relationships provide safety necessary for healing, reminding us we're not alone in our struggles. Consider how you might foster deeper connections in your own life. How can you create spaces where people feel truly seen and valued? These questions matter not just for those struggling with addiction, but for all of us seeking wholeness in a fragmented world. As we approach our conclusion, remember that healing isn't a destination but a process. It requires patience, courage, and willingness to face uncomfortable truths. But as both Jung and Maté remind us, this process leads not only to recovery, but to growth. And now, as promised, the most profound insight of all, addiction is not the enemy. It is a messenger. It signals something within us seeking alignment, healing, and connection. It represents not failure, but the soul's persistent search for wholeness. Jung believed addiction reflects a misguided search for transcendence, the human spirit yearning for experiences of awe, connection, and meaning. When these needs remain unmet, we seek substitutes that mimic fulfillment without providing it. This explains addiction's relentless quality. It attempts to fill a void that cannot be satisfied externally. Here's a revelation. The antidote to addiction isn't control, it's connection. Connection to ourselves, to others, and a purpose beyond ourselves. This insight lies at the heart of both Jung's and Maté's work. Healing begins when we move from shame toward understanding, when we create environments where people feel safe enough to confront pain and supported enough to seek healthier ways of being. Jung called this bringing the unconscious to light, a journey of self-discovery that empowers us to reclaim wholeness. Maté adds that this journey requires redefining our relationship with pain. Instead of avoiding suffering, we learn to approach it with curiosity and compassion. Pain isn't our enemy, but a signal that something needs attention. When we listen to this signal rather than suppress it, healing becomes possible. This understanding transforms not just how we view addiction, but how we approach all human suffering. It invites us to see beneath behaviors to human beings searching for connection, meaning, and wholeness. It challenges us to create communities where vulnerability is met with compassion rather than judgment. Imagine a world where everyone struggling with addiction encountered empathy instead of condemnation, where the question wasn't why can't you stop, but how can I help? This shift in perspective could transform not only individual lives, but entire communities. As we conclude, let's return to our central insight. Addiction stems from disconnection. Recovery isn't about fixing what's broken, but rediscovering what's been lost. Our authentic selves, our capacity for connection, our ability to experience joy and meaning. Think about your own life. Where might you be seeking connection? What parts of yourself have you neglected or forgotten? How might you begin the process of reconnection today? These questions aren't just for those struggling with addiction. They're for all of us navigating what it means to be human in a complex world. Because ultimately, addiction isn't a story of despair, but a resilience of the human spirit's capacity to endure and its possibility for transformation. By understanding addiction's deeper psychology, we gain not only insight, but hope. Hope that healing is possible, that connection is attainable, and that wholeness lies within reach for all of us. Remember this, addiction is not the end of the story. It's a call to awaken, to grow, and to rediscover the beauty of being fully alive, fully connected, fully ourselves. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If this perspective resonated with you, please share your thoughts in the comment below. Has understanding addiction as disconnection changed how you view yourself or others? What steps toward reconnection might you take in your own life? Like this video if you found it valuable, and subscribe to the Wisdom of Human Nature for more explorations of what makes us fundamentally human. Until next time, may you walk the path of compassion for others and for yourself.